welcome back to Interpreting the Scares! That's right, we're back at it on our month-long journey through the nightmares. 2 weeks in, guys! Yet another film that I've never seen before, but this time I actually have heard about it. It's Planet Terror. Planet Terror is a Grindhouse-style B-grade horror film written and directed by Robert Rodriguez, starring the likes of Rose McGowan, Josh Brolin, Marley Shelton, Freddie Rodriguez. It even has a short cameo role from Bruce Willis himself. In a nutshell, the best way to define what this movie is to simply say that it's all about a zombie outbreak that a bunch of people have to stop those responsible for causing the outbreak in the first place. So if you followed my channel long enough, just about 3 years ago, I covered all of Quentin Tarantino's films, including something called Death Proof, which came out as part of a double feature with this movie, Planet Terror. But because I was specifically watching everything Tarantino related, I didn't think it was that important to include this film, since it's not actually a part of a franchise or anything, unless you consider it a spiritual franchise, because that's what this movie is. Also, Tarantino actually plays a short cameo role in this film, which is interesting, but I digress. So the Grindhouse title that both of these films are attached to is basically a love letter to the Grindhouse and exploitation films of the 70s, and the very specific style associated with them, like the grungy, dusty look of frayed physical film, like the editing when it comes down to stitching the scenes together, and how if it came out today and not being a Grindhouse film, it would look like it was edited terribly, but that's part of the soul of the film. That's true for Planet Terror. It was also true for Death Proof, so that's part of why the two movies came out at the same time. They feel like they're related. They're not really, but they feel like it. Also, the goofy, corny, honestly kind of stupid atmosphere of the whole thing. The movie's really dumb, but I have a lot of respect for the style in which it's approaching its storytelling. The movie's over the top, way over the top in pretty much everything that it does, and sometimes that works for me, while other times it doesn't. Where it worked for me was mostly in the visuals. So there's a lot of practical effects, gore, makeup in this film that is honestly expertly handled. It's really good. It felt like the gory films that would have come out back then, especially when the gore itself was unrealistic and just overly gory just to be gory. For instance, at one point, zombies pull a guy apart. It was an amazing effect coming from a visual effects perspective, but it made no logical sense as to how the zombies were that strong, or more likely, why this guy ripped in the pattern that he did. Also, the look of Rose McGowan at this point is incredibly iconic. I just recently saw somebody have a Halloween post where they were dressed up as her character, complete with a gun in place of her leg. This is another thing that's over the top and unlikely in every shape and form, but it works. I actually think that the gun for a leg thing is this film's strongest aspect. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a gun as a leg until maybe the third act, so don't go into the movie expecting to see a lot of it. I did, and oops. Where the over-the-top stuff doesn't work so much for me is in the script, the dialogue, because for whatever reason, the lines that people spoke didn't always work for me, and it often took me out of it. I'm reminded of Death Proof, which had a ton of dialogue, because, you know, it was Tarantino, of course, and something about that really made Death Proof special. But Rodriguez just isn't as gifted as Quentin Tarantino is when making a movie. In certain areas, of course he is, yes, but he's not as much of a consistent director as Tarantino. So as a whole, I'm definitely somebody that prefers Death Proof. The main differences between the two movies is that this one has a huge focus on practical effects and gore, while I'd actually say that Death Proof is more of a practical effects and stunt work thing. And that stunt work in Death Proof stayed with me these last 3 years. I don't know if the gore in this will, but the gun for a leg will. One interesting aspect of this film is that it starts off with a fake trailer to Machete, and since then we know that Robert Rodriguez has made a couple of real Machete films starring Danny Trejo, neither of which I've talked about on the channel yet. I have reviewed them in written format, but maybe it's time to revisit them for YouTube, because they are something else. I just forgot that the series started out as a fake trailer as part of this Grindhouse project, and that's kind of cool. One of my main complaints about this film, though, I didn't want to forget to mention it, is that I didn't care so much for the plot, which seemed to be a pretty common zombie narrative at the end of the day, and most of the time I didn't really know what our characters were attempting to do. All I know is that there was a lot of violence, a lot of over-the-top gore and makeup, but if we're specifically looking for a story goal, I'm sorry, I either missed it entirely or there is none. The best I could say is maybe just survival in general, which to me is kind of weak, always has been, especially compared to Death Proof, which did feel original and does stand out as something different. So while I can say that I definitely like to revisit Death Proof, I don't know if I can say the same for Planet Terror, which I gave a C+2 with an overall score of 66%, which if you can see my unbiased and biased scores down there, I gave 66% across the board. That basically means that the movie was okay all around. It did exactly what it needed to do to tell the story that it intended to tell. Everything from the technical aspects to the entertainment levels. Bottom line was okay. Nothing that I think was phenomenal at the end of the day though, and that's it. What do you guys think about Planet Terror? Did you guys watch it? Did you see it along with Death Proof? And if so, which one do you think is better? And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out!